Good evening and welcome to this rather impromptu show with me, Mrs. M, as I'm known as, and my husband, who is putting up signs left, right and centre as if he's managing the show tonight. But you're not used to it, are you? You're not used to being in the guest seat, are you, my love? So anyway, it'd be fun. For those of you that have seen us work together before, you'll know that this is kind of open, isn't it? We're quite transparent, aren't we? And we're really wanting to
Well, here's another way of looking at it. Welcome to the variety show, and on stage at the moment is Louisa with a ventriloquist puppet, which is what I look like, almost sat on your knee. If we go a bit closer to each other, you could do some spiritual ventriloquism. Yeah.
Is that how you feel? You feel like a puppet because you're not in the driving seat?
If I go back a little bit and get all little like that and go leaning towards you, if you put your hand up my backside now. It was just a ruse. It was just a ruse to get you to put your hand up my backside. Not really.
Okay,
everybody.
So let's bring this back because we're gonna be talking about all sorts of things, and we can fly fast and free as we go along. But before we get going, I want to welcome everyone. I can see we've got lots of people watching already. That's no doubt your effect rather than my effect, Carl, because you've got tons of followers. So welcome. Let us know in the chat room where you're from. I can see we've already got greetings from Lisa M and Bob Yonker. So it's hello from Karen and Bob. Are you guys back now? Are you back in Portugal? We've also got Nubia Net, hola, and Jane. Hi, Feel Good Muppets. Nice to see you.
It's the Schmuppet show. Yes.
And we got Cindy B joining us from just down the road. Good to see you two on a show together. Wow, we've got loads of people joining us, and we've got Jackie from down the road as well saying hello both. Wow. So where do you want to start then? Because, you know, the title for this is The Truth About Following Your Bliss. And to be fair, we just
that was a bit of
a little bit earlier, you know, when we had a bit of free time. So where do you want to
I think that's clickbait. We probably won't talk about following your bliss at all. That was just to get all the new agers and people who like that sort of thing engaged and watching. No, we will do that. It came up in conversation earlier on, didn't it? About following your bliss, and it just occurred to me that might be quite an interesting thing to talk about. But more importantly, or as important, there's a couple of things I'd like to share, and I put up that banner earlier on. Just checking in with everybody. I mean, these are bonkers times, aren't they? In all sorts of ways. Let's not beat around the bush. You talked about authenticity and transparency. There's all sorts going on right now at the moment, which is the climax of all sorts of weird stuff going on for the last couple of years, or couple of millennia, according to some. So we are living in interesting times in the most Chinese of ways. So I genuinely asking how everyone's doing. And so check in. You know, there's not many places where, you know, in your mainstream media, it's like, what do you think about this or that? And those two choices are usually opposite, this or that. You've got to choose, position yourself and have a good old argument. Here, I genuinely want to know how everyone's doing in these crazy times. Let us know. And also, another thing that might be rather good is, for example, we've got Cindy B here, haven't we, tonight, who is a celebrant and a permaculture teacher. We've got Jane here, who is something of an expert somewhat of an expert in human design. Bob Yonker is an inspirational musician. I don't know if I've described you correctly. We know Lisa M, lean spiritually as well. So share, folks, you know, make this a bit of a spiritual human potential marketplace. Feel free to let us know what you do and how people can find you and learn about your skills, because I'm guessing that those skills and the sort of people that are gravitating towards us tonight are light workers or people who are more of a or their work is of a more positive positioning and very useful possibly to the people of the world right now. So share away, let us know how you're doing, let us know what you're about, and please pop that in the comments as well. Is that okay with you, Mrs. M?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, as I'm looking down the list of people that are joining us, I don't know everyone because a lot of them are associated with you, but these are people who are of service to people in different ways. You know, people who are good eggs, people who show up show up in their communities, show up to people. Yeah, we must say hello to lovely Nuno as well.
Yeah.
Nuno, really nice to hello. Nice to see you here. Bob's just sharing with us that we're trying to make moves to follow our bliss, but the current energy is kicking our butts. You know, I got an email, a message from you earlier. I will have a look at that for you in terms of timing, because you know, there are times to move. And right now, obviously, in this last week, as an astrologer, I can share with you that Mercury went retrograde for those of you who panic about things like that. And also, we've had Jupiter moving signs, and we've had 2 eclipses either side. So this is a time of quite unstable energy. You know, this is the time when there's a higher incidences of earth shattering things. You're taking over again, aren't you? What are you sharing now?
Oh, sorry. Did that actually work? I beg your pardon. I'll take it off for the time.
Yeah. So yeah, we would be really interested in knowing about what's going on for you. But actually, before we do that, or whilst you guys are thinking about what you want to share with us, I want to ask Carl a little bit about his life, because I know he talks very generally every day on his show. And he's very good at including people. You may have noticed that, like he's including everyone right from word go here. But people don't really know much about you, Carl. Carl, sorry, it sounded like I was calling him by a different name then. But
yes, well, first thing is my name. My name is Carl. That's the first thing to know.
One of the things that never ceases to amaze me is you don't necessarily give too much away, and yet people feel so included by you that people assume that they know you. But tell us a bit about you, you know, like in terms of following your bliss, because my understanding of you, having known you for quite a few years and being married to you and with children and stuff, my understanding is that you're somebody who does follow their bliss and who does it to a fault sometimes, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and yet,
absolutely.
And I respect you for it. You know, like we've gone through many ups and also a few downs. As you've been following your bliss, I've been following mine, and it's quite an interesting journey, really, isn't it? So where do you want to start?
Yeah. Guilty as charged is where I'll start, and a plea bargain, I suppose, for attenuating circumstances to be taken into consideration.
What are the circumstances? Which circumstances?
Say that again.
I've got
what the attenuating circumstances?
Yes. What are those circumstances?
I thought you were holding up a square of cheese for a minute. I said that's a really confusing thing to see in a courtroom. A piece of craft cheese. I got to rewind quite a lot with this because I want to. That's that's why we addressed. That's why we called the show what we called it. The is following your bliss. Does it work, or is it just a load of old new agey balderdash? And it's both, as far as I'm concerned.
It is both, I think.
And you got it with any of these things. It's so easy to get into clickbait and extracting opinions and arguing about opinions. If I can, I'm not interested in trying to persuade anybody. I just thought it'd be an interesting thing to talk about and to talk about and own it completely from my point of view. And that's why I feel okay about saying it is a load of old new age balderdash, and it does work. And that varies, depending on how you look at it and what your context is, where you're coming from, and also what your mission is in life. And that's really important. So if 2 people, I think, have an entirely different context for the value and meaning of their lives, it doesn't matter whether they agree or not. And they're very likely to have a different view on whether following your bliss works and what sort of results they'll get in life and how they interpret them. So bring it back to the personal experience, which is always best, isn't it? And that's what we welcome here. It's always brilliant to, rather than, having a bit of argy-bargy about an opinion, is to own something and share something. So I'll start with that. And I think you're right. I could be seen as somebody who has followed their bliss, i.e., done what I wanted to do because I thought it would be a good idea or would bring me happiness and pleasure, as one way of looking at following your bliss. And that has been chaotic for myself, for other people in my life. So on that basis, I wouldn't I wouldn't recommend it, because of the trouble it causes for yourself and for other people. So what's the opposite then? If the warning is don't do it because it might cause problems for other people, is it best not to do it? On one level, on a rational level, yes, but we know as well, don't we, from being human beings, that it's actually very hard to stop following your bliss. And I think everyone's doing it, really. Everyone follows their bliss, even if they are the sort of person that I will characterize as a 9 to 5. You know, these awful characterizations of the blue pill sheeple person with a 9 to 5. I can't stand those sort of characterizations, but they can be useful from a illustration point of view. But even that, who you would imagine is going to a job they hate, is actually in some way following their bliss, because they are afraid of the opposite, aren't they? They're afraid of the mortgage not being paid, or not looking respectable, or stepping into the unknown. So actually, what you could characterize as their boredom, or what they even might express as their boredom and frustration and their anxiety, and they go and do workshops of the weekend as a counterpoint to their daily life, they're following their bliss in their own way, or they're at least doing something to avoid pain, which you could say is following your bliss. And then there are the others who make a fine art of it and let you know about it. And I might be guilty of that, of going so far in following one's bliss that it causes chaos. And the other part of it, the truth of it, if you like, is that it's done now, isn't it? You know, I did what I did. It could be called following your bliss. It could be called selfish indulgence and a cause of chaos and misery for myself and other people. But it's done, and it's what matters is how that's managed, resolved, and understood now in this moment, or any, you know, in the present, because it's done. It's done. You know, so from that point of view, you know, as a sort of scientific experiment, did following my bliss work? I have no idea. It just is what it is. It's, you know, I don't really like that phrase, but in this instance, it's absolutely spot on. You know, it was what it was. It's created what is, and that in many ways is all there is to it. However, if we position that differently now, what would it mean to follow one's bliss now in this moment? I've got something different to say about you know, whether the rational analysis of the past, and is it a good thing, and then how to go about following your bliss in the moment, and what that means is another conversation in which we may or may not go into according to your wishes here as the chair and host of this conversation.
I'm glad you've recognized that.
Yeah, finally.
I really like that, and somebody definitely put the thumbs up there, gave us a bit of a Facebook like there to what you were saying. In particular, when you were giving kudos to people who tend to have a 9 to 5 life, you know, that maybe doesn't look that different or blissful from the outside, but for them, they may well find that blissful. You were talking about trouble for other people. No, exactly. You don't. You're spot on there. You're talking about trouble for other people, and how expressing yourself may well have caused trouble for other people. Where do you think our responsibility starts and ends? And what can you say about other people's experience? You know, when people get upset about your behavior or somebody else's behavior, you know, what are your thoughts about things like that? I mean, I asked, really, it's a really big question. I asked that because there's a lot, you know, like if one were to believe the news, and I say that very sort of pointedly, if one were to believe the news, you know, you would be learning that everyone's falling out right now because we're all falling short of each other's expectations, and we're all getting kind of angry. People are yanking our chain. You know, they're doing things that they're you know, like people, some people are doing things that other people don't like, and people are losing their heads about it. You know, we're coming into a time
pennies in a bunch.
Yeah, they are, and we're coming into this time, and it doesn't seem to be stopping at the moment. But it's just from my personal, you know, perspective, it looks like we're on this exponential rise of offence. You know, where
it depends where you look.
whoa, hang on. The mechanisms to get angry are there for everyone. Go on. You're saying it depends where you look. That's a good point.
Well, you
Go
said
on.
it looks like that, doesn't it? And of course it does. If I go to Twitter a couple of times a day, maybe 3 or 4 times a day, in a sort of compulsive moment to in one sense, it's my little barometer of what's going on in the world. But actually, it's not, because it's just people I've followed. So I've curated my own incoming experience, and I just get the same payoff every time. I have the same old story or judgment about the people who I chose to follow, and then I get all high and mighty and spiritually correct on them. Only not to their faces, even just whilst I'm looking at them on Twitter. But it's an example of how you can get a view of the world. I opened it up. I looked at the world through Twitter and then drew the conclusion that the world is like that. And, to bring it back into this conversation and our conversation about following your bliss, that's perhaps the best question at the moment, isn't it? In this moment and right now and on this show is, are we in what we might call bliss or not? That's all that matters, really, isn't it, right now? Because the question of following your bliss suggests that you're not in it, and that you're trying to get there. And there's an absence of unhappiness, and because I have bored you for over a decade about this. But for my definition, which Jane has asked, what is my bliss? My bliss is the absence of problems and the absence of unhappiness in my life. It's quite neutral and undynamic in some ways. It's not excitement as I used to imagine happiness. But I think I was very lucky when I was younger to have quite a lot of those excitable happiness, supposedly happiness inducing experiences, to only discover that there was no sustainable joy or bliss in those things. They were things. They weren't about the state of bliss, for want of a better word, that is natural and indigenous, is that right, or instinctive inside human beings, apart from all the nonsense we personally and collectively create to stop that happening.
Excellent.
That's it. That's
so
probably it.
So it's about our choice and our, where we choose to put our focus.
Yeah, I didn't answer your question. I think your question was about where does it begin and end?
Yeah.
Where we might have judged ourselves to have caused chaos or hurt or offense for somebody else. Again, in the spirit of what I've just said, is somebody upset about what I've just said? Is somebody upset with me now? I don't think anyone is upset with me now.
Not current, not at the moment. It doesn't look like it. If they are, they're doing it secretly.
Yeah, well, and that's, to me, is as good as it's not happening. I'm like the kid, going like, they can't see me. But
we actually have a kid like that, don't we? He does.
We do, and he's very wise in his own way, and that is really, really important and profound, I think. I'm not saying I'm saying something important and profound. It's profound to me that we could have a discussion about offending and upsetting people and causing chaos for other people. But if that's not actually a real thing right now, it's a intellectual pursuit. It's just another bit of chat, isn't it? And that's not to say it's not a useful way to pass the time, or it wouldn't be fun to do that. But it's not of the highest order as far as I'm concerned. If it's not happening now, as in, we know people, don't we, who constantly upset themselves by looking at information that constantly upset themselves. Now, to me, that's not very intelligent. And they may well think it's extremely intelligent. And there is
and that might upset them to hear that.
Yeah, and yeah, me saying that would be upsetting, wouldn't it? Is that I'm just sticking my head in the sand, or I'm ignorant, and to them that may well be true, and I have no argument with that. But I know if I think of them as being upset because they, like me, look at Twitter, and they're doing that now, and I'm sat here pondering the nature of bliss quite untroubled by anything at the moment. I feel quite superior.
I love it. Well, let's get some other takes on this. We've got quite a few comments coming in, which is really wonderful, and you do bring people to the chat room. It's lovely. So Jane is saying, having a profound what the F experience. But I have to say that Louisa's dream coach advice is helping me a lot. Just to fill you in there, Jane revealed to me that she had a dream, and in that dream, I gave her some advice, like I was a coach in her dream. And I asked her and I said, oh, was it good advice? What did I say? And actually,
That's
when she revealed it to me, I was like, oh, I probably would say that. So I'm very pleased to hear that Dream Me is helping you.
Hold on a minute. That's incredible. No, that's a life hack. Hold the front page. That is a life hack.
Jane,
if you're thinking to yourself,
go on.
What? No, if you're thinking to yourself, I would love to go on an Abraham Hicks cruise, but I can't afford it. If only Stewie Wilde was still alive, I wonder what Stewie would say to me. I'd pay anything to talk to Stewie Wilde. Just dream it instead. Jane is able to hack into the minds of others in her dream world. And I suppose the skill that you have that I don't have with Jane, that you have, Jane, that I don't have is dream recollection. I could well go to bed thinking that, what are going to meet up with Stewie on the Astral tonight, and he's going to tell me stuff that's going to change my life. I can see how that could be true, but it's recall that's the problem. I would just wake up with a smile on my face and not quite know why, I suspect.
Yeah, but it's great that you mentioned that, actually, because I was talking about that with Rick a few weeks ago on my show when he was talking about quantum hacking. I didn't realize it was a thing. And then I remembered that when I was doing my hypnosis training, we had to think of a famous person that we wanted to, imagine or hypnotize ourselves to believe that, we were them, and that when we opened our eyes, we would be able to do something that they were able to do. So I saw like people, be like Spock from Star Trek and whatnot. And I chose to be William Blake, and I actually did a rather convincing William Blake drawing, and wrote something sort of like philosophical down the side. But I actually remember feeling really quite disgusted as I was looking around the room, seeing how society was looking. I felt very judgmental as William Blake. But quantum hacking is apparently something that lots of people do now. So they think, okay, I wonder what Superman would do. I wonder what Carl Munson would do in this situation. And, they can bring about the, using the power of their imagination. It's quite a powerful tool. So Jane, awesome.
Yeah, Jane, good stuff.
Yeah. So Nunu saying he likes your word, light workers. I think that's a cool word. So let's
Trabalhadores da luz, I think, in Portuguese.
Is that what it is? That's amazing.
Trabalhadores da luz. I think so. I mean, that's a very literal translation, but I wonder if Portuguese New Ages use that phrase. Jackie Grant will know.
Yes, Jackie, let us know. So Jane is saying, I'm gathering courage for a different book club podcast about acupressure. I love acupressure. I've got a Jane Fonda book about that. For the emotions.
Of course you have.
Follow it up with creative prompts so we can put the book into practice. I think that's a great idea. I really do. And if I'm not mistaken, Jane, you would be following your bliss in doing that. That would feel good, right? So Nubian, I'm mostly fine and healthy. I'm rather optimistic. Plus, I'll happily live in a predominantly African-American city that's considered a little scary and heavily armed. Wait, what? Well, I like that, Nubianet, that you are, that you're living somewhere that is a bit edgy, and yet that you're feeling optimistic. I remember you must have lived in some places that have felt a little bit dodgy at times, Carl. A little bit
I think
edgy.
I've moved. I think I might have moved to places that have then felt a little bit edgy or dodgy. I think I'm the there goes the neighborhood guy. possibly. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in London, so I have it's very different now, but it had its going to school every day was a pretty scary thing. Encountering other schools and other kids with weapons and stuff like that. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I was a child. I was just truly terrified at times, but it's what James was saying, I think, Nubianet, on the Monday show about choice. You know, we can choose our state, can't we? So much of the time. Obviously, if you're walking down the street and it's heavily armed and hostile, that becomes more challenging, and is something that might need some attention either in a moment or, you know, just contextually, and have a shift, a move if it's too much. But a lot of it, I think, of the drama of fear and terror, it is habitual and mental, isn't it, rather than actual. I think that's how human beings are. But again, I don't know. I can't speak for anybody else. I don't have that. I suppose the closest analogy I have to that myself is living in a country where I don't understand a lot of what's going on, but I don't find that hostile. You know, we speak a lot, don't we, about the warmth and friendliness of Portugal, generally speaking. So I have to say, I don't, you know, find myself in uncertain and mysterious situations which are potentially stressful for people, but I often don't experience it as that. But I take my hat off to you that if what I'm hearing is a transcendent state of mind and peace, despite what people say about where you live or the story about it.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I've noticed when I've lived in areas that feel a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more edgy, or during times when there's been a very edgy experience, like for instance, back in 87, you know, when there was a big old hurricane, or when there's a disaster somewhere.
Oh yeah.
All of a sudden, life feels very real, doesn't it? And although it might not be very blissful, there is something really quite extraordinary about being completely in your body and completely in the moment. You know, it brings you back to your senses. Which I quite like. Carl, are you able to take that banner down? Because I don't know where to find it, and I find it really distracting. It's thank you. Where was that? Show me later.
In my secret cache of banners. I'm not going to tell you where that is.
So Cindy's saying, someone described me today as a compact bundle of positive energy. I can only hope to live up to that.
No question. Yes. Raise your hand if you agree. Absolutely, Cindy. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, 100%. Nuno's saying, no one asked, but I think that my bliss is be aware that I'm in a journey with an end somewhere and somehow on time life. Well, I guess in your business, you'll be aware of that, won't you? For anyone that doesn't already know, Nuno does sell medical insurance, you know, which kind of does bring, you know,
and life insurance.
And life insurance.
Yes.
Does bring to mind the, you know, the finality of life. How do you cope, Nuno, with knowing that you're on a journey with an end? You know, because some people really, you know, I think a lot of people live their life trying to forget that they're coming to the end of their life.
No question.
You know, it fascinates me.
I mean, you know, talking of spirituality, that right there, what you said, you know, a lot of spirituality, as I see it, and no disrespect to anybody involved in any of this, but a lot of spirituality is hobby and pastime, and pastime, a way of a different flavor of hobby and activity with a spiritual twist. I think we're really getting down to the nitty gritty there of spirituality. You know, it's something that a topic or an angle that could be truly spiritual would be what you just said. You know, how do we come to terms with having a body that will end at some point? Because there's no question about that, is there? There's no question that no one seems to defy that. That is one of the rules here. And how we come to terms with that is truly a magnificent endeavor, or an endeavor with potentially magnificent results and freedom, if you can discover if you can be at peace with that. Some people can, or appear to anyway. We don't, with these things we're talking about, you don't really know, do you? What we say and what actually is going on, we have to take with a pinch of salt, because when we're getting down to this nitty gritty, only the individual knows for sure whether they are truly experiencing what they say. And I don't doubt them, but I just think that's, again, is another spiritual truth, is that you can't know anyone else's experience. And when it comes down to it, we are in the nature of this existence. It is an individual matter, in as much as, this body that comes and goes is individual, or would appear to be, this unit. Its experience is as well. So you can't know for sure, can you? And we live in an age, don't we? I was listening to a Barry Long tape, and he was talking. It's really interesting, because he was talking about in the 80s. He said this healing thing. And can you imagine a time when, people weren't actually surrounded by healers? And he was talking of this time in the 80s where healing was becoming a thing. It was coming out into the open. It was everywhere he went. And it hasn't always been like that. And in our time, so many people are interested in, or are practicing as a kind of healer, or somebody with aspirations to make things right, to make individuals right and healthy and peaceful, and to make the place, the planet, and society healthy, whole, and peaceful. I suppose for each, it just like that lovely thing we heard the other day about the plants that grow outside your house might be the ones you need, like nature knows. It might be that's what's happening with the human body, large, not an individual human body, but the body of humans, is that we're arising as healers to meet the supposed problems that we can see are occurring. But it's amazing to think that these are changes, aren't they? These are shifts in these are sociological, societal shifts that we're experiencing.
I love that.
And this widespread interest in spirituality as well. Everyone's a lot of people in the last couple of years have been prompted, haven't they, to they've been knocked, their needle has skipped on the vinyl of their life in the last couple of years. Might have ended up in a different groove, or even skidded right off to the end onto the label.
Yeah, that does appear to have happened, I think, for some people, for sure. I love what you were sharing there, so much so that there were so many things I wanted to go back to, but we got so many people commenting that we're just going to have to park that one. But Nunu has answered that question already. This drives me to work on legacy each day with my daughters, my wife, my customers, humanity, planet Earth. It's never ending. So I'm guessing part of Nunu's journey is about the people in his life, and and the relationship between him, like where he ends and where someone else begins, and all that exists between it. I may have just been assuming a little bit too much there, but
well, I concur with your analysis of Nunu. He's definitely a service person. How he operates his business is in service to others, and clearly to his family as well. And that again is a sentiment, isn't it? A consciousness thing at the moment. It wouldn't have been said. Presumably, your grandfather instinctively went to work, and maybe your grandma stayed at home in this old-fashioned family situation. And there wouldn't have been any talk, would there? Your granddad, I don't suppose, sat at the dinner table and said, it's been another great day in service to humanity. It's what drives me. I'm a service-based light worker. It just wouldn't have happened, would it? Like 60 years ago, whatever. But Nunu's not the only person that I'm aware of that is in our community who takes that view of making a living, for sure, and in a particular way, of it having meaning, rather than it just being a job. He's not alone in that, is he, in these times, or in this community?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's kind of one of our motivations, isn't it? Which is possibly why we can see it in Nunu. Bob Bob and I'm all like, blah, blah, blah. All of my words are kind of coming out all sort of like jumbled up tonight. Bob is saying, so we chose the last 2 weeks to go to Italy. I think that's in reference to the fact that he chose to go traveling in between the two eclipses, Mercury going retrograde and Jupiter changing signs. So he went to Italy where the Earth is in constant motion. Yeah, he was saying earlier that they had some sort of earthquake experiences and tremors and things because of Italy's position, and all restrictions were lifted with the resulting massive movement of humans. So it's interesting because, like, you know, when we've spoken to Bob before, you know, he shared with us that, you know, one of their passions is to travel and to live in different places and to explore the world, which I guess would be one way of following your bliss. And of course, you know, travel can also bring up all sorts of different things. You know, when you go to a place where you've never been before, you know, I mean, like we came to live somewhere where I'd never even been before, which is a bit bonkers. But there's something great, isn't there, about seeing the world from a different perspective, you know?
Yeah.
Because you can never know what it's like
you make
out of your place of belonging until you go somewhere completely new.
Absolutely, for sure. That is, again, part of the nature of having a physical body, isn't it? And a type of consciousness that is comparative and relative. So yeah, travel broadens the mind. And you said something very interesting. You know, you might be following your bliss when you're traveling because you love traveling, but it's not very blissful when you lose your passport, is it, or get mugged in the city you've always wanted to go to. And that's, again, you know, that is just life, isn't it? That is just what can happen. And I suppose that puts the emphasis on following your bliss, doesn't it? When it's there was a distinction I remembered thinking about this tonight, is in following your bliss. Are you doing what you please or pleasing yourself? And you know, of the forces that run human beings, well, the two forces that in my view run human beings are there's it's love or fear, isn't it? Or it's, you know, it's the devil on one shoulder and the divine on the other. And doing what you please is possibly the darkening and less helpful energy, because it's like if you did what you pleased, if you did as you pleased, like a teenager who just couldn't be bothered, you might stay in bed, and that could be seen as a version of following your bliss because you're doing as you please. But if you do what pleases you, in the same example, that would be getting out of bed and going to look at a sunrise that same morning. You know, that the story is of on the one hand, the person who does what they please, which is, oh, I can't be bothered to get up today, I'm just going to lie in bed. And we know what that tends to lead to, don't we? I mean, sometimes we really need it, but often it's like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. You know, that's, you know, that was just me giving in to my laziness or whatever. A lot of the time, that's my personal experience anyway. However, if I did what pleased me, that's a different and profound angle, which is to get out of bed and go and look at the sunrise. Now, both are selfish, aren't they? Because we're essentially selfish. You know, we are selves acting, doing our own lives, and by definition, selfish. They're both selfish things. One to stay in bed, one to get out of bed and go and look at the sunrise. But the latter appears to be an ennobling experience and an enriching experience, and one that might charge that person up positively. And make them a value to the community, whereas, you know, the person who just stays in bed. And I know there are exceptions, because of course, you know, you could get up and go and view the sunrise and run over a rabbit on the way, and that'd be you know, that's just part of the comedy, a tragic comedy of life, isn't it? But you get the point that there is doing what you please and doing what pleases you, and truly pleasing. If we're moved to do something that we just know, don't we? That is the inner knowing. It's not scientific really or rational, but you just know. This is the greatest force. It's heart based, isn't it? It comes from somewhere deep and profound and useful, and that to me strikes me as the best type of following your bliss.
Yeah,
not just doing what you want.
A bit like what we did a couple of days ago, where we got up at silly o'clock in the morning to have a look at
Oh,
to have a look at the total
yesterday.
lunar eclipse. Was it only
Yeah,
yesterday?
I think it
My
was only
goodness,
yesterday.
what's going on? Yes,
Yeah,
it was. God, it
yeah,
feels like so much time has gone. It's crazy, isn't it? So
it
Jackie's
was.
saying,
Yeah.
if I get upset by someone's words or actions, I ask myself why I respond in the way I do.
Knowing you,
I love
Jackie, I'm not surprised. Yeah, that
that.
you're introspective in that way. Yeah, yeah.
Mm. And we got a great question here from Jane. Is it necessary to post about one's bliss on social media, or only if that would add to one's bliss? It's interesting. When we first got together, somebody asked us to not post about our bliss because
Mm.
it was apparently upsetting to other people, and that was
To be banging on
really
about
hard.
happiness.
Yeah, I found that very difficult. Um, to feel that somebody else's happiness was taking precedent over my own happy sort of innocent expression. I found that very difficult. You know, like someone saying, "Please don't be so happy."
Yeah,
You're going to say,
I think it's part of the formula, though, isn't it? You know, it is an unnatural mechanism, invention,
mm,
and whilst it is definitely pleasing to post about one's pleasure,
yeah,
there's it's cause and effect, isn't it? It's like it's not self-contained, and I mean, I wouldn't. I'm not saying that person had a right and should have complained about other people expressing their happiness. You know, I know of an amazing story where a woman who
oh yeah,
who had ended a relationship went into a shop because the shop had wooden trains with the kids' names on, and it just so happened she passed a shop where the the train had her name and her recent ex's name, or her, not her, but her, the person she recently split up from. And she went into the shop and asked them to take it out of the shop window because it upset her every time she walked past. Now, this is fantastically human, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you could say, yeah, yay for authenticity. I mean, this is the beautiful stuff of human goings on, I think. Because
mm,
they're on a rational level, as you break that down, you can say, well, that's great, that was radically honest, and she went in and she told them, and then that person had a chance to do something about it or not, which I suspect
mm,
they probably did, because I would have taken it out the window just to have that dealt with and done and dusted. Um,
mm.
and then on the other hand, like how massively self-indulgent. Go around the other way,
Mm.
walk the other way
Yeah, yeah,
for a couple of weeks until. But you know, these are all. I think these are all things that come about out of our complexity, and we
mm,
just don't need social media, do we? Really, it's just something that's occurred and evolved, and so yeah, of course, if you put your if you put your outpouring somewhere unsuspectingly onto other people, they are going to respond how they're going to respond, and you've got to kind of be responsible for that in a way, haven't you? And I don't mean responsible as in it's your fault they're upset, but
mm,
you are now in a live situation of someone
mm,
sharing their upset with you, and that's just the truth of your life in that moment. And
mm.
like, what are you going to do about it? And I think
It's
that's great because that moment's really powerful, isn't it?
mm,
You can have a discussion about whether they're right to do it, or the real power, I think, is in what, like Jackie just said, what did it
mm,
bring up for you? What does it show you about yourself when that
mm.
person says that to you?
Yeah. That's such a good question. That is really, really good. I like all of that. Now, that's put me in a bit of a pensive mood. I kind of want to reflect on that a little bit, and I'll come back to that at the end, I think. About bliss, that Jane is saying, I've been too preoccupied with not offending people that I ended
The
up
theme.
doing very little of what sparks true joy. That's the habit dream coach Louisa gave me some great advice on. The great dream coach. Wow, I love being the dream coach. So yeah, I've also found myself in that same position, Jane, where I felt so preoccupied about causing offence that I ended up doing very little. I ended up kind of almost shutting down my light a little bit. And it's interesting because I felt like I remember Carl giving me a little bit of coaching on it, and and I remember you saying you're making it about yourself. Don't take it so seriously. Because I can't actually make somebody upset. I can't physically make them upset. They can choose to be upset. And actually, when people were offended by some of the things I said, it wasn't because I wanted to upset them. I wasn't deliberately trying to upset anyone. Just what I said didn't vibe with the people that were watching it, and they could or reading it, and they could have just had the choice to walk by a different shop, but taking responsibility for it was actually presupposing that I'm much more important to that person than I probably really was. They were probably getting offended by lots of people, not just me.
the arrogance of claiming offence, sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh, so many people are offended by me. So many people don't like me.
Yeah, and that can be a massive overstatement because they could have so moved on by now, couldn't they? Whilst any of us are still thinking about how much offence we've caused.
I think that is the thing. A lot of, I being quite reflective, I sit down and spend months sometimes thinking about something, like the effect that my personality has had on somebody, that they've said, in the moment. And they probably have moved on. Some people say, I didn't like that. And then they move on, for them.
And you ring them up. Yeah, you give them, it's been sort of on your conscience for months and months, and you talk to your therapist and your coach and your friends about it. And eventually you pluck up enough courage to ring them up and say, this thing between us, I've phoned you to talk about it. And they go, what thing?
What thing? Yeah.
The thing that I've been thinking about for the last 6 months since that Facebook post. I can't remember. Sorry, you'll have to let me know what that was. Yeah, it's that. But there's definitely a theme tonight. This is what happens, isn't it? It goes into a little bit of a theme or an energy slipstream or something. And this is the lethal combination that the folks like you and Jane have of wanting to be self-expressed, because everybody does, and the horror of upsetting people, and often the minefield effect of upsetting people, as in, sometimes we can be crafting a bitchy comment that we know, as we exocet that into somebody's timeline, life, or as a passing comment, it's going to do the job. But the ones where offense is caused and you are mortified to discover it is I think a really painful thing for those people who would have preferred not to upset other people. It's really hard for the likes of you and Jane in those sorts of situations. And I think it comes back to understanding where that came from. What was it? How did you get caught unawares upsetting people? It was probably from overbearing parenting, wasn't it? It's usually to do with, like a child. It's very much like a child behaving like a child does, and then being told off for it by a parent. You massively embarrassed us in that situation. It's like, I don't even know what you're talking
disgusting.
about.
You disgust
what you did. You're a disgrace to the family, and suddenly there's all this shame because the parents want to look good, and it's understandable. But I think those things are often related to that, aren't they? They're often related to that mortifying pain that children experience when it's shown to them that they're wrong in some way, and it's completely made up rubbish. But when you're a little child in the shadow of these human gods who are in charge of your life, it's really powerful, isn't it? The parents don't know that, of course, so they wouldn't want to hurt you in that way. But I think we've probably all been there, haven't we? And some have been there more than others, and I think those who inadvertently hurt and offend other people have probably had that experience. And then this is the other part of it, Jane. Then use it as an excuse, I'm afraid to say, because I
was just about to
reckon,
get to that.
yeah, because
Yeah.
the thing about not self-expressing because of the reactions of other people eventually comes back to us as individuals, doesn't it? We're choosing not to, rather than being censored, because we're not 6 anymore, are we? We might be 26, 36, 66. And if we're still doing it, that's because we haven't resolved that issue. And it's probably nothing to do with anyone else anymore, apart from ourselves choosing as a result of not wanting to feel that pain again. And what do? You're the coach here. What do you do when you're in that situation of wanting to self-express in business or life or in relationships or whatever, and you feel blocked? What to do? To do it anyway?
Yeah, I always think, if there's something I want to do, and I feel almost like paralyzed, like I can't do it, or there's something going on for me, that actually makes me feel more determined to give it a go. And what I realize is I just haven't found the right way to do it yet. So I keep it as an open possibility. But also when I feel the discomfort that leads me to say, oh, I can't do this right now, or I mustn't do this, or I start to feel shame or something, I just ask myself, when was the last time or the first time I ever felt this feeling? And I try and find the root cause of it. I try and find that moment where, I notice in my body where it is, how it feels, if there's a color, if it's moving, all those kinds of sensory things. And then I, sit and just ask myself, when did I first feel this? Because you are right. In my experience of working with other people, but mainly working on myself, is the recognition that often our behaviors start really early on, like you say, in your childhood. Sometimes a little, sometimes people have these experiences that they've had an experience in a previous life, or in the womb. I've come across that with people, and then just in the understanding of what was going on back then, the answer usually presents itself. There's lots of different things we can do perceptually to change that, but understanding that it's not an original thought, that's leading you to have that behavior is usually helpful. I recently was looking at me feeling censored, and was feeling a little bit miffed and feeling, I don't know, why am I blocked or whatever. And I realized that I had several different thoughts going off at the same time. But one of the thoughts was, and it's really embarrassing to admit, but I realized that in feeling like nobody understood me, I realized I was separating myself from people, making myself special. I mean, it's a really weird thing to make yourself special about. Like, most people would be like, oh, I'm beautiful, or, oh, I'm hideously ugly, or whatever. But in that moment, I realized, when I was thinking, why is it that I get misunderstood? Because I can be really, really clear. Why am I getting misunderstood? And I realized that at some level I wanted, it was how I was making myself special. And when you're making yourself special, you are by default separating yourself from everyone else. And so I was thinking, right, if I'm being special about this, what is my thought that is separating me from other people? And I feel embarrassed. I feel like a real dick for like saying it. But let's be, transparent and everything. At some level, I felt like, because I'd obviously at some level been rejected in the past, I didn't trust that people could receive my message, or receive anything good about me. So, there was a distrust of other people. And then there was also this really aberrant feeling in me, and an abhorrent feeling as well. And that was, they don't deserve to see my light. I mean, what a weird thing,
Punish them.
But yes. So, at some level, I was also punishing people for not being open to me, which was a complete racket on my part, from an unhealed part of myself that I couldn't see. But once I was able to see that, then all of a sudden stuff started to move and shift quite quickly, and new ideas started to flow and flood in. So yeah, that's my experience, but everyone experiences things differently. But I do know the pain of feeling censored, Jane, for sure. And I think, recognizing that we can hold it as a possibility and a challenge to ourselves, you know, that we just haven't found how to do it yet. That makes it a possibility in the future. We've got quite a few comments coming in, but I just quickly want to say goodbye to Nunu, who's just said, sorry, I need to go. Family is waiting. Bless you and bless your family. Have a lovely evening. Thank you for joining
Thanks,
us.
Nunu. Thanks for
So
being
nice.
here.
You were looking
these are, well, yeah, I'm afraid that I've offended people. Only joking. I'm getting better at that now. I don't agree with the idea that it's just choice. And fair enough, Jane.
Are you offended?
Yeah, I'm offended now. I'm offended that you don't agree with me. There's so much embedded in one's physiology and brain after being told off as a kid that makes you shut yourself down. I get it. I totally get it. I'm not trying to undermine or take that away from anyone. Believe me. And this, you know, isn't this amazing? Agreed, Jane. Only 2 years ago, I went to see my 81-year-old mother who lives in the UK. During my stay, something was said where I was reduced to a 6-year-old child. I felt the same pain. It happens, doesn't it? It happens. And
it is the most painful thing, isn't it?
I mean, and isn't it the most beautiful thing that Jackie is sharing a story, not a story, sharing a reporting an incident of that kind. I mean, that shows such magnificent awareness of what went on, which probably wasn't quite as clean cut as it's reported there, because, you know, retrospect and space and distance gives you a little bit more more of a clinical view. It must have been devastating. And all that happens in the torrent of emotional, you know, the emotional whirlwind tornado of being spun back to being a 6-year-old. How awful is that? And I think that's, you know, this is the good old, you know, responsibility conversation, isn't it, I suppose, and whether it's a choice or not. It's when it's a choice. And I apologize for saying, if I in any way suggested it's just a choice, I don't mean it like that. I mean something richer than that. I would rather not it be condensed down into, it's all just a choice, folks. You don't have to feel like a 6-year-old. I don't mean that. But clearly, in the situation that Jackie describes there's choice and responsibility after realizing that, I think. Isn't there? It's like, okay, I get it. I see what happened there. I can, in the next interaction, or I choose if I have another interaction. Now that would be pretty harsh, wouldn't it, to say, okay, I'm not up for being reduced to a 6-year-old. I think our relationship is over. People don't tend to do that to elderly parents. They might do something else, though, mightn't they? They might choose to be different, to show up differently in that, such that it doesn't happen so easily. You know, they may not drift in. So please don't think me glib with that. I know it's much more nuanced and richer than it's just, you know, I'm not going to go all Tony Robbins on you. And I don't think Tony Robbins is that glib, to be fair. But it's, you know, I'm not trying to be some, even though I've got the right microphone for it, I'm not some, it's just a choice, Jane and Jackie, come on.
And he does do that, doesn't he? No, I really thank you, both of you, Jackie and Jane, for sharing that. Because, I mean, you know, I think part of that is also the male versus female programming, you know, without getting into a massive gender debate, because I'm not trying to cause offense that way. But I know that from my experience, women are a lot more yielding and are often we take the blame for things or accept the blame for things, you know, in the sort of like programming of being yielding. You know, we try to we almost try to make other people feel more than maybe they deserve at times. You know, we're always trying to prop up people and stuff. And men sometimes just want to reduce the conversation and get out of it. And you know, like, you know, I have noticed in our conversations sometimes when I'm talking about something, I just want to open up and express and try to get to the crux of what's going on for me. Because once I get to the crux of something, I can usually have a realization of some sort. And with that comes an urge or a transformation for me. You know, like once I see something about myself, that doesn't quite work or doesn't quite get me the results I want, then I tend to move on and change. Now, one thing I have experienced with Carl in the past is like the idea that, well, you know, you don't have to get to the crux of things. You know, you could choose in this moment to let it go. And, you know, to me, that seems abhorrent because there's something that I can't let go of because I haven't, you know, I'm pretty sure I can't let go of it. But your method, actually, Carl, I do believe that you are able to let go of things because of your actual inner programming as well.
The
It's
Munson
an
method.
interesting one. Yeah, I mean, you come from a line of people that let things go very, very, you know, on the surface, and then tend to move through things, don't they? They don't tend to stick around to,
or not, as the
yeah,
case may be. I mean, you know,
yeah,
yeah.
underneath, maybe.
Yes, the seething resentment can keep running on, can't it?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
passive aggression. But
yeah.
actually connected to that, and in some sort of resolution of the, you know, does following your bliss work? Again, I'm interested in this, the following bit. It's the following that's the problem, I think. You know, bliss is bliss. If we can come to some sort of agreement, well, we can't because we can't check with everybody or do a vote or anything. But for the purposes of what I'm about to say, I'll define bliss as the absence of unhappiness, as joy,
Mm,
not as excited happiness, not the ups and downs kind of happiness of human life, not the roller coaster ride, but the negation and the absence of problems,
mm,
equanimity, I guess you would call it. That's what I'm talking about with bliss. I'm not talking about a rush or, you know, a hit of any kind. I'm talking about that. Yeah, again, it's like it's something that's experienced personally, but I hope you get a sense of what I mean. You know, the absence of
mm.
trouble. That's, to me, is bliss. That's the, you know, people, and again, people point to babies, don't they? Go, oh, that baby's smiling, and they don't know any, you know, they're just sitting there. They don't need to be watching telly or you know, people prodding them and doing funny faces. Some, you know, clearly some babies can do that. A lot of babies you know, are miserable, and unhappy, and hungry or whatever, or have got wind. But we get a sense, don't we, of what bliss
Mhm,
means. And perhaps that's the great problem of our age and our collective mentality, is the chasing, is the
mm,
pursuit. And I have it that, you know, it's much more useful. It's been more useful to me to understand that allowing my bliss and enjoying my bliss that is always present. It's me that drifts away. The bliss doesn't go anywhere. I am bliss. You know, in the Hindu or you know, the Sanskrit sense, you know, Sat Chitananda, truth, consciousness, and bliss. I am that, and then I'm not it when I allow my mind and
mm,
its machinations to take me away from that reality, because it's a realization and it's a reality, and the realization leads to a reality. And that's what I think has, you know, after all this chaos that we, going back to the first part of what we were talking about, of causing trouble for myself and other people around me, children, you know, in my life, in my attempts at family life, that's the problem. That's what I don't think anyone, well, they were around to tell me, but I couldn't hear it anyway. You know, the bliss is in you to be enjoyed, and is always there. And going around the world turning it upside down and looking it for it in other people, other places, and other experiences is very human and very
mhm,
unsustainable. And yeah, I would, if I could improve on Joseph Campbell, which is quite a daring move tonight, it would be to allow your bliss, not follow it, because in the
mhm,
following comes that, you know, comes the very discussion we've had. Should that person that we characterized as having a quiet life of desperation, should they sell everything and invest in Bitcoin and buy a bit of land in Portugal? I don't know. It might work, it might not. But
yeah,
I do know that wherever they are right now, there is the possibility of allowing their bliss.
mm.
and they could enjoy the state they probably long for right now if they only knew how. And what an amazing thing that would be, that the gurus and sages and holiest of teachers have been saying that forever, haven't they? And meanwhile we haven't.
Yeah.
we've not heard them or done something different.
We've been so preoccupied, haven't we, with our survival and like the trappings of what a blissful life might look like or sound like, that we've been looking outside of ourselves, I think, for bliss. I mean, that's the thing about babies. I just want to go back to babies, actually, because you're right. Like, babies don't tend to look outside themselves initially. They learn that early on, when they're not looked after, or when they don't feel very safe. But like, babies have a really great ability to just be happy in the moment. Like, they'll look at their hands, they'll look at their feet. They're fascinated by themselves. They're fascinated by everything. They don't learn about something smelling bad or looking bad straight away. Everything is just an experience. And they are just in that state of being, which I think is really, really lovely. Going back, actually, just to the idea of children and these like massive hurts and things. I mean, both Carl and I think we'll put our hands up and say, yeah, both sensitive children and sensitive beings. Very sensitive to the feelings of other people, and we're raising our children so that when something hurts them or upsets them, that we're there for them if we can be, to the best of our ability. We can't take away their pain. At best, I think what we want to do is just show them that we're there to support them through it. We're there to witness it. We're there to hold them. We're there to love them and show them compassion. But when you see your child, like at 2 or 3 or 6 or whatever, crying their eyes out about something that means the world to them, that let's really hurt them, like there's a meme that I've seen on Facebook and Twitter and stuff, with like 2 and 3-year-olds really losing it, like losing it because their shoes aren't green or something, like they want us to just change, like they want something in that moment, and it doesn't happen, and they look absolutely heartbroken, and they go into this like massive state. And we forget what it's like to be a child and to feel so vulnerable. But I've seen, I've hurt my child, accidentally, with the words I've used on a couple of occasions, and I've seen their bottom lip quiver, and I've seen the heartbreak in their eyes to think that they might not be good enough, or that mummy might not love them, which obviously is rubbish. But that realization that there's something wrong with them is painful to observe. And so we try and sit with them and give them the chance to feel supported, because we all go through those experiences, and they do really stick around, especially if there's no one there to be with you in those moments. Those children would hold on to that pain and really believe that there's something wrong with them, and of course there's not.
And it's never too late, is it? It's never too late.
Never too late.
And we do this. This is part of this brutality of this existence as well, isn't it? Let's face it. This is quite a tough, as I'd love to say. It's no wonder God loves us, because this is actually quite hard being here in this way, in this existence. And these things happen. They happen, don't they? And your choice, your sense of responsibility is to deal with it, isn't it? And that's a great gift. And we just never know, do we, how it's going to turn out or what the result's going to be. But, well, I suppose following your bliss in those moments and ridding that situation of pain and lack of love is to address it and talk about it. That's a great example, isn't it, of following the road back to bliss, such that that child can be free of that hurt in the first place, and then at some point understand the mechanics of how they got hurt.
Yeah, because I mean, that's the thing. They're too young to understand how it all occurred. The important thing is just that the feeling of pain that they feel supported and kind of trusted or loved, or I don't know. I mean, I don't even know that that's going to work. You know, we're all just doing the best we can, aren't we?
Exactly.
Let's have a look at some more of these comments. So, you know, talking about contrast is an interesting one. So Bob is saying, you know, when they were in Italy, they focused on the beauty, the fun Vespator, the multiple flavors of gelato, all blissful experiences. We also experienced lots of contrast, which helped us to become clearer of our preferences. And yeah, I think that is true. I mean, you know, this isn't the first time I've lived abroad. I've had a few goes of it. I lived in France on and off for 5 years. I lived in Bali. Did I tell you I lived in Bali?
You might have mentioned it.
For a short while. You know, and spent quite a lot of time working abroad as well, and in loads of places, in fact. And they don't always lead, these adventures don't always lead the way that you know I'm expecting. Like my trip in Bali, you know, it was really coming to the end, but I didn't manage my money very well, and it really had to come to an end, you know. So there's all these, like, you go on these wild adventures and you think, oh yeah, you know, I'm just gonna spend the capital that I had in the house I've just sold and have a trip of a lifetime, and just not get your act together and end up like losing a ton of cash, you know, and then thinking, oh, was it worth it? Well, you know, it always was, but things don't always, you know, work out as we're expecting.
No,
and you
they
know,
can't.
I'm really pleased that I have followed my heart and had these adventures. And I also know that my parents really struggled when I went on my first adventure instead of going to university. You know, that was a bit of a shock for them. You know, our need for freedom and our desire to live life and express ourselves, you know, can be a bit of a shock, and then, you know, families are dealing with the shock of it. You know, and it's the fact that we're all so connected, isn't it? But who knows? Does that mean I should stop doing it, you know, to give my parents an easier time of it? Who knows? What do you
Well, you
think?
haven't yet, have you?
No, I haven't.
I think you well, you know, you had a very beautiful conversation with your mum only this morning, didn't you? And
Yeah,
it's like that was some sign of meeting halfway, I think, and that's probably maybe that's as good as it gets, is some mutual understanding.
yeah, 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 definitely. Newbinette saying it's I was a teen and watched a movie on how to be graceful or something. She said to walk as though you're in a garden. It means your interactions with others are more pleasant. I love
Grace
that.
is I don't know if that's grateful or graceful, but either way, I mean, it works, doesn't it? And
Really does.
grace to me is, again, it's harmlessness and absence of trouble and fear, and you know, those things we would rather not be blighted by.
Mm, yeah. And Newbinette's adding, you know, this works to a point, you know, like the, you know, seeing the garden around, but then actions are eventually needed. I've reached that point in my
Yes.
environment when you see homeless people surrounding the building you live in. And you know, I think that's the beauty of really feeling where you are and feeling the set point in your heart. Like, you know, I think, you know, wandering around, experiencing your garden is really, really great because it opens you up to the possibility of greatness where you live. And then when you have that contrast that Bob was also talking about, you know, it opens you up to action, you know, purposeful action, and knowing that it's time. I think one of the difficulties in our life right now is the fact that most people feel like they have to be taking action all day long, every single day. And yet I think the most magical action is the one that just arises in you because of you living your life fully, you know, and then you know which one to take. You know, it's the one that arises, it comes.
I agree, and that is certainly the active part of following your bliss, for sure. And that's what a lot of us would prefer to focus on in following your bliss. And we get better at it, don't we? It's like, I knew that with intuition was right. Look at me now. I listened to that and I did that. And that's
Yeah.
definitely part of following your bliss. And I think it has a, you know, like it has a shadow, like all things do, and it has an opposite in this existence. And you spoke about action and the need to do something. And there's that part of it, the action that is, you could say, intuitively or divinely inspired. And then there's the contrasting action, isn't there? there are things that the world conspires to show us we need to take some action on. And that is possibly the hardest part of the spiritual journey, isn't it? It's much easier to feel intuitively inspired, go do it, and stick in your thumb, pull out a plum and say, look at me, I'm a light working intuitive, and I made that happen by following my heart and my bliss. And that's true, and I'm not taking anything away from that. And there's also the other part of it, which is perhaps our kind of, divine right action, the hard work, the karmic side, payback, righting the wrongs, and that the really awful hard stuff that you've got to address and you keep putting off, or you keep having it show up, like possibly the I'll follow my bliss. Here's a story then of somebody who went to Bali, and they got enough money together to go to Bali, and it was a fantastic intuitive move, because they realized so many beautiful things about life, themselves and others, relationship, all sorts of wonderful things in Bali. And they also noticed that one day when they went to the cash machine, they didn't have any money left. And that bit of following their bliss hadn't really been taken care of very assiduously or in a very disciplined way. And it was kind of like one of their life habits. And dealing with that thing would be so helpful to them. But they'd filed it under, if I follow my bliss, this will all just come right. And very, very occasionally, and actually not just very, from time to time, the plan doesn't go quite like that, does it? And the cash machine is a harsh guru when it when it says that payment to the insurance company that you forgot about has now gone out. You are overdrawn, and that last 20 quid you thought you had is not available to you, and nor is the money you need to book your ticket home. And that's the other bit, isn't it? That's the bit we don't like to talk about, I think. Us old light workers, those repeating patterns, those things we know we've got to attend to, but and they're probably tied up with childhood pain as well.
I would 100% agree with that. Most of the people that I speak to with money issues are here to teach me about them as well, because like we all tend to have the similar things at a similar time. But it's fascinating. It often comes back to receivership. One of the things actually, Jane, that I noticed in not feeling like I could shine and not feeling worthy of being listened to was also that I'm not very good at receiving things. I'm very good at giving. I overgive and not very good at receiving. And there's a lot of people that consider themselves to be light workers or healers or whatever, who are in a similar position, and they spend all their time giving and giving and giving and saying, I give so much and I get nothing. Well, I get these great experiences. It's all there to be observed, and I try and have a bit of a laugh about it from time to time. So I think we should
it's probably a whole lot more simple as well, because there is a tendency for ogly boggly overcomplication in the new agey world as well, isn't there, that we're all guilty of, when in fact it can be just down to some very straightforward nuts and bolts worldly stuff that would actually be very helpful and supportive to get under control. But there is some drama still going on around it that is of more value than having the breakthrough. So it's all relative.
That can always change. When I repeat, when I feel stuck about something, I just remind myself I just haven't resolved it yet. It's always
yes, indeed, work in progress. As a new age platitude.
But it's not really new age platitude. I mean, it could be taken as such, but it's also highly useful. This is our good friend Shannon from Texas saying, "Hey, let's got the grandkids down for a nap. Happy to connect." So it's beautiful to have you here.
Shannon is so important to this relationship. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, really. And also encouraging me to out myself as an astrologer. I mean, Shannon was like the original client, really. So thank you so much. A few more. Let's have a quick run through. We've got quite a few people with some amazing comments, I'm sure. Jackie saying, I believe we are all healers. The last 2 years has given many of us great space in order to reflect. Absolutely. I was talking to another great healer the other day who was saying to me, we still haven't reached the maximum point of saturation in healing work. And that in 2027, that was apparently when astrology was going to really hit. According to all trends and predictions and stuff, astrology isn't in its heyday yet. It's still seen as something that's, on the back burner, that's like not necessarily, it's not popular enough, but it's getting to its peak popularity is going to hit it in about 5 years' time. And the same for most healing things. So it feels to us like everything's saturated, but to the rest of the world, they don't even see it necessarily. They're not even awake to healing opportunities. So it's interesting, isn't it?
Or that person hasn't been to Totnes, possibly, as well.
Totnes is definitely a place where you trip over a healer every 5 minutes. Lisa M is saying, I know this sounds crazy, but between the 2 years of pandemic and recent US events, I have such a hard time just talking or having conversations with dear friends or families. One word can set people off. Yeah,
Amen.
Yes. That's a difficult one. It'd be interesting to know how you deal with that. It is difficult. There are some things that we don't talk about in my family, like in my extended family, or there are certain conversations I have with certain people and not with others.
Can I be controversial here?
Yeah, go on. Do.
There is a scenario with all of this, and I would say the world is asking for it. That where there could be amazing breakthroughs, and perhaps maybe we're in this state because those breakthroughs are required and are being called forth. And I think there is an element here of what's the choice here, what's the responsibility here in those conversations. And I'm not for one moment suggesting it's easy, because it's definitely not easy. It's habitual and it's karmic, and it's got to a certain point where there's that situation that Lisa describes. And I'm not talking personally about you, Lisa. I understand this scenario. You could call it a kind of climacteric point, certainly in American society, possibly in most Western societies, with the use of with the way we've begun to use our minds in that polar way, and with opinions and politics and all of that sort of stuff. And that said, I don't think it's a write-off. I think it could be possible to do the work on disarming those situations. They are weaponized situations, and we all have to take responsibility for that. I think because if we're the other side, we're doing something as well. It's not just people doing it to us. If we've been characterized as the other side, we probably are doing something as well to think of them as the other side with their view. And I think the catalyst, the lever, is in a massive amount of responsibility and stepping into it, because in all of those situations, people have got a listening for us, haven't they? They think they know us, and we think we know them, and that's the bit that needs disarming. It's like, it's a minefield, isn't it? You're just walking around, and these emotional bombs are going off everywhere you tread, and you don't know where they are. And it might be, if it were at all possible, in some elevated communication with our loved ones and relatives and whoever these people are, to set the context of, let's go into a different field where there aren't, let's defuse these minds first before we start talking. It's that metaphor, and saying, look, I know it might be that you have thoughts and ideas about me, and I accept that, because I have them about you. I think you're an asshole as well. And it's not true. It's not true. It's just where we've got to. And I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry I look at you like this, because it's lazy and it's unhelpful. and it gives me this result. It gives me the result that we can't even be in the same room anymore. And we're all doing a little bit of this, I think, and that would be the amazing breakthrough, wouldn't it? To get that. Is it Martin Monish, where the Moorish conqueror or something used his own body to keep the door open so that his colleagues could run in and overrun Lisbon? It would be the equivalent of that, of this incredibly manful and heroic effort to throw yourself into the breach of human communication and say, I'm willing to sacrifice my reputation, how I look, everything, and all that egoistic nonsense to have this relationship work. Will you work with me on this? Will you make a start with me? I'm sorry. You know, what is it, the Ho'oponopono thing? Whatever. You know, I'm sorry. What is it? I'm sorry.
Please
forgive me. I love you. I mean,
and there's another one.
Wouldn't that? But even those three, wouldn't that be an amazing?
Yeah.
If it were true that you could start a conversation like that. You know, I've got. It's not just what you think about me. I've got all these ideas about you that are making it difficult for us to talk to each other as well. Let's see if we can diffuse and disarm this now. And that would have an effect, wouldn't it? That would have a beautiful effect with those particular people, and I suspect that would ripple out.
I think it would. I also think the way these arguments are erupting, or where these words are erupting, they've been set. They've been very purposefully set to create uproar and diversion and dispute, because just for shits and giggles, I think, and possibly control and shitloads of money, but. You know, like all the time all the time we think of ourselves as a label, or we apply labels to each other. We're doing a disservice to each other. You know, it's really funny. Before this whole pandemic started, you know, most of my clients were in America, and I had absolutely no idea what their political leanings were at all, or their thoughts about. You know, I knew they're all into healing at some level, because most people that seek an astrologer are. But I had no idea about their politics, because nobody actually really spoke about them. You know, in my relationships with them, we all just had really fine conversations and interactions. And I was really curious to see what would happen in, you know, the run up to, you know, the Trump Biden election. And what was revealed by my clients, in particular after the 6th of January. And I was really kind of shocked, and then not surprised, to realize that actually my clients really do fall 50-50 in both political parties, almost exactly. And the great thing for me was having these relationships with these wonderful women, mainly women. I have these wonderful relationships with them, and I trust them, and I love them as people, because they are all really nice people. When you get to know people without the label, without knowing the label, life's easy. But of course, we've been reminded of our labels, and we've been encouraged to use our labels, and that's definitely where some of the trouble starts.
Yeah, and my political slogan, if I were campaigning in the midst of that, I mean, and what you're doing with those women is the opposite to politics, isn't it? You have unconditional positive regard, supportive relationships, and you want the best for each other. That's not. You couldn't say that about politics. I mean, you could say it, but it wouldn't be true, from what we can see. And the real, I think, the really difficult pill to swallow with politics is that for every individual who is angered by politics and the agendas you speak of, is you can't have it both ways. If you want to be together, you have to stop being separate. That's just the law, or whatever you'd want to call it. You can't go against that. You can't be, you know, you're not. It's not Heisenberg or Schrodinger's political cat where you can be both things at the same time. You can't be together whilst being separate. And we've begun to pride ourselves so much, haven't we, on our separation and what makes us different. And then I've got really surprised after years of separating ourselves, like you did, and you said about, you know, no one understands me, I'm really special. That separation story
Yeah.
I mean, and you describe it beautifully. The separation story then stopped you being related and bonded to people.
Yeah.
It denied them their access to you. I think I might have to go now, but that's my final message. You know, allow your bliss, and if you want to be together, which I think we all ultimately do, you have to stop being separate. And I'm gonna leave you at that point because I think is a situation I have to deal
Yeah.
with.
I think
But thank you so much.
we have to really give thanks to our kids and their friend who've been playing beautifully in the lounge and having fun. And Carl is just about to sort that out. I'm just gonna finish off having a whiz through these amazing comments and stuff and all your sharings, and then I think it's time to wrap it up. Yeah, Jane's talking about brain psychology and also the physiology. As a child, you operate in a different brainwave. Yeah, absolutely. Delta, theta, alpha, which is not of using language. Beta, that stuff takes a more holistic approach, such as acupressure. Yeah, I mean, you're right, Jane. I mean, that's one of my real feelings about children. Like when I was raised, and seeing lots of people talking to their kids, like I don't want to say anything about my parents necessarily, but people shout at their kids and they're saying, I can't believe you did that, why did you do that, blah 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 blah. And for a really long time I don't tell my kids off for things that they cannot understand. There's all these programs, like child whispering programs and super nannies and things like that. And they teach you from an early age that children are actually manipulating you, and their bad behavior is learnt and they're just manipulating you. They're crying, at night because they're manipulating you. And I just think that's a horrible, horrible abuse of being an adult, actually. And we've been cultured into it, to help manipulate our children into going to sleep on their own and stuff. Kids cry for a reason. And so I think until kids can understand with actual language, which is what we use to communicate, we have to meet them at their communication level, which is physical. We have to look at them, we have to hold them, we have to touch them, we have to, make them feel close, which is what they're wanting. So I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you. I love this question from Cindy B. What's the difference between bliss and contentment, or is it merely semantics? I don't know. I'm sure Carl will have loads to say about that. And maybe it's already come out because, this conversation has been going on for quite some time. And I've been a bit lax in coming to all of the comments. If I don't mention your comment, it's just that I'm looking at them all and a bit blind to it. I'm kind of getting confused. So another one, when you said bliss is absence of trouble, thought you meant absence of problems. I get absence of trouble, but word it differently. Yeah, Carl. Yeah, Carl's wording is sometimes difficult to understand. And say for me, bliss is being in flow, starting physically. Yeah, I think if you can go there in your body first, it's much easier in the mind. So I practice coherence breathing sometimes. I've got a show that I did with Jeff Granville. He's spoken about coherence breathing loads. He's taught me it over a series of different shows I've done with him. So just check it out in my back catalogue on Louisa Munson. Jeff Granville, really, really good. But the coherence breathing, it absolutely kind of drenches you with serotonin. It absolutely changes your physiology. And then from that, it's so much easier to reset your thoughts and feel calm. I feel my body relax straight away. Elizabeth is saying, interesting talk. I just joined in. I totally get what you say on bliss. To me, that is being one with all, the God feeling in me. The world pulls you out of it, though. I think our society makes it hard to always be in bliss. I know it's in me, but I can always connect to it. You know what? I really like that, Elizabeth. And I really like what Nubinette was saying earlier when it comes to gardens and walking around in the garden. Kyle was saying to me earlier, as you do, to your partner and stuff, you're saying, wow, you're looking really hot at the moment. And I looked at him and I thought, you know what? I'm feeling really me at the moment. And the thing that really is making me feel like me is, for the first time in a really, really long time, we've got our own garden and I can watch the kids safely and be in the garden. I can be in the garden for hours and I sit there and I'll be sowing seeds, tending to plants, tying them up, and this, that, and the other. And while I'm doing that, sorry, Carl's eating. While I'm doing that, tending to the garden, I'm feeling blissed out, and it's wonderful. So, he's taking himself out. He obviously wants to have a bit of an eat. Shannon saying a working definition for me: the allowing of experiences of my life to unfold without judgment or attitude. I think that's beautiful. I love that. Jackie Grant in a being of light. Un ser de luz. I love that. Lee McGrady is saying, I find my healing and bliss in big up spaces, pushing my personal boundaries and the limits of my body. At the time, it's nothing more than torture, but when you realize your goal, it's bliss. Yeah, I love that. There is something in pushing yourself, when it feels right. Like, when you've got that goal that you feel so aligned to, because it's a real goal. It's not like, I guess it's one that you've tested for yourself, and that it's fully aligned to your purpose, to where you're going, matches a lot of your old skills, and it probably involves you learning something too. That kind of challenge to me is a bliss. When I get there, or the process of learning it is a huge bliss for me. I love learning. So thank you for that. Bob Yonker, love and blessings to all. Good night. Perhaps Louisa Munson, dream coach, will show up tonight in my dreams. Well, that's lovely. If you've just joined us at the end, I've been showing up, or I have shown up in somebody's dream as a dream coach. So there you go. Quantum hacking, I think that is called. If I do show up in your dream, I hope I give you something of good value. Who knows? Stranger things have happened. Lisa saying, I listen, but it really causes pain. I internalize this because I won't go down the argument road. Also, Lisa, at some point, in terms of, the company, whereby you're feeling that internalized pain, there also comes a time when I think it's important to recognize that if you're not comfortable to be able to address it, and nobody else is comfortable to address it, and it's causing you pain, I think it's okay to choose not to see people and choose not to relate to people whilst there is that pain situation, and also give yourself the opportunity to keep that open, so you don't have to close everything down, but you could think, I don't know how to handle this yet, and right now it's causing me pain. While it's causing me pain, I need to step away. And I know that when I feel inspired, and I know that when I can handle it and feel wonderful, then I'll be back in the conversation. I know I've done that a couple of times in recent years. I've never really stepped out of a conversation before, but sometimes they are untenable, and there's nothing wrong with admitting it. It's actually quite powerful. Oh, thank you. Shannon sharing, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, and thank you. So we were just missing the thank you at the end. So that's the Ho'oponopono prayer. That's wonderful. We're almost at the end. Newbienet saying, when discussing politics in our society, I try to use us and use Anna as much as possible. It makes people angry. Too bad. So long as it's working for you, Newbienet, that's all that counts. Anyway, we are right at the end of the show now, and Gaining Wisdom has come to leave us with a heart. I absolutely adore that. Thank you so much to everyone that's joined us tonight, to my beautiful kids downstairs that have helped facilitate that, to Carl, who has shown up. It's so nice to get the chance to listen to him. Obviously, I'm listening to him over a cup of tea and a slice of toast most of the time, and managing the kids. It's a real treat for me to ask him questions and hear him share, because I love the way he. I don't know. I'm one of his biggest fans, I guess, which is all good. Thank you all for showing up today. And for your wonderful comments, your ideas about what following your bliss means. I think this is all about keeping it real. So anyway, please do check in with us another time. It's been wonderful having you, and we hope to see you another time real soon. One final comment is muito obrigada, boa noite, from Cindy B. Thank you so much. Whew. Until the next time, people. God bless. Bye for now.